Hey guys, welcome to my channel where I talk about fine arts and I make art and I talk about whatever I want. In this image, you see me working on a marker drawing of a whirlpool. When I was younger, I used to make these marker drawings where I would have like a shape in the center and then I would take all my colors and then just kind of outline that shape until it became bigger and bigger. So I think this was kind of a nostalgic piece with markers, and some people might say markers are not fine arts, and I politely and kindly disagree. I think you can use any medium and it can be fine art. And I guess I want to talk about the inspiration for this piece. And the inspiration for this piece is One Piece. This isn't a One Piece channel. I'm just talking about whatever I want to talk about, but I want to give credit where credit is due. I'm painting what my sort of interpretation of a whirlpool. That kind of made me start to theorize. I enjoy watching theory channels. And I was like, you know what? I have a theory of my own. Whether it's true or whether it's not, I still want to share it with you guys. My theory is that I think that Scopper Gabon is the man marked by flames. And I know that, a lot of theorists and other folks in the space disagree, and you're welcome to disagree. That's fine. I just want to give you my reason, and it's inspired by this piece. It's inspired by a connection I made with whirlpools. So this is my theory. This is not a theory channel. This is just me making art and sharing what inspired the art. So what we know about the man marked by flames, look at me being a real theorist, is that he's marked by flames somehow. Who knows exactly what that means? It could be a scar, it could be a tattoo or something else, but this marking is probably the most noticeable thing about him. And we'll get back to that because I think that's the biggest reason why people do not think that it is Scopper Gabon. Makes sense, that's fine. They have access to the last poneglyph, which is crucial to getting to the final island. And Shiryu from the Blackbeard Pirates thinks that because, this is the key to Laugh Tale, the last island, that it has to be, the world government has to have access to. I disagree because Scopper Gabon is not part of the world government, but we'll get back to that. They sail, whoever the man marked by flames is, they sail on a black ship. And then finally, and most importantly, they can create whirlpools. So I think that's probably the linchpin of my theory. So we'll get into it. Part of this theory has, what is it called? Headcanon. So I obviously, if it was so clear, then it wouldn't be One Piece. But, here's my thing. So, okay, first part of the theory, you see that he is marked by flames. It's not the most noticeable thing about him, and I think a lot of people will say, honestly, why would someone not recognize the left hand, the mountain eater of the Pirate King? Now, I could argue that none of the Straw Hats knew who he was, but they also didn't know who Rayleigh was, and other pirates knew who Rayleigh was. So that's not the big thing, but my theory lynches on the fact that he's older. He has hair color is different. He goes by a different name, Yasan. He actively hides his identity. So when Road tried to explain to the Straw Hats who he was, he stopped him. He has great observation hockey. He's actively sort of hiding his identity. He was the only person to notice that the God Knights were on the island. So his observation hockey is high end. So if you wanted to avoid being identified as the left hand of the Pirate King, he could. And so I think observation hockey is how I get around the fact that why wouldn't people notice the fact that he's the left hand of the Pirate King and not that he has a scar on his face. And so here's my headcanon about how he got this scar. Now, he lives in Elbaf, and Elbaf's biggest vulnerability is fire. This is my headcanon. This is where I'm creating story where there isn't any evidence for, this story. I think that he got that scar protecting Colin or Ripley from the Adam tree. There's a story about a village called Hogan that sits on a branch in the Adam tree that caught fire when lightning struck. And since the fire never goes out, the entire branch had to be cut with it and the village. So could it be that Skapar Gaban saved someone from Haugen and got that scar? That's my theory on how he got the scar. He has access to the last poneglyph. I think that kind of is a plausible theory because all of the Roger pirates basically got to Laugh-Tale. So he's probably actually seen the last poneglyph at the very least. And then the reason why I think it's him is because all of the Roger pirates are positioned in key places to help the Straw Hats get to the final poneglyph. And so you see Shanks. He had access to the Gomu Gomu no Mi, what is it called? The Hito Hito no Mi Model Nika. And Luffy happens to eat the devil fruit, and he expressed a dream that was similar to Roger's, and he realized that Luffy is basically the person that they've been waiting for, and he was worth sacrificing his arm for and essentially giving him the fruit accidentally, albeit. And you know that Crocus, the doctor of the Roger crew, was basically on the, what is it called, Twin Capes Lighthouse, and he guides ships into the Grand Line, and Crocus sees how Luffy is with Laboon, and he offers basically the crew a log post, and that essentially helps guide them on the Grand Line. And Silver's Rayleigh is basically positioned in a place so he can coat ships for pirates, and he basically watches how Luffy basically doesn't want to know all the answers, and he doesn't want basically a shortcut. And I think he realizes something is unique about Luffy's character, and it reminds him probably of Roger. And so, you know, he ends up training Luffy, you know, and protecting him. My theory hinges on the fact that I feel like all of the Roger pirates are positioned strategically on the Grand Line towards Laugh-Tale to sort of guide people. And I think a super strategic position, you know, the last poneglyph, and I think that Skapar Gaban has that. And when he was fighting with Luffy, he's like, talk to me later if you can save this island, right? Because he was talking to Shanks, right? And he was telling him, I'm not just gonna believe him based on your word, I gotta see it for myself. And Shanks was like, do whatever you want. So I think that's probably what they were talking about. So I think, you know, Skapar was kind of testing him to see when he unleashed Gear 5, just to see the white form. And so I think Gaban was basically kind of trying to test him and see if, you know, what Crocus, I think he was on the island with Crocus, and when he was talking to Shanks, if this was the real deal. Okay, that's my theory on that. Next, the black ship. My theory is that the reason the ship is black is because it's made out of the charred remains of the Hogan village. And I think the sentimental value of this is probably huge, right? Because this is his sons and his partner's homeland. I know this is headcanon, but oftentimes the storytellers, the people who basically tell stories, have a personal connection to it, even though that personal connection isn't revealed till later. For example, Dalton in Drum Island provides background on the island, and he has a connection to King Whirlpool, but he never reveals that until later. You see that, like, Rebecca in Dressrosa shares the history of the Colosseum like it's a distant memory, but, you know, later we reveal that she has her own personal connection to a lot of that history. So my theory is that when Ripley shared the story about Hogan, that she also had a personal connection to that island, and that Skapar Gaban saved her, and then the remains of the tree ended up being a ship. And the Adam tree is used for ships, you know? So it wouldn't surprise me that the charred remains of the island would you know, still be reinvested into a ship. And then finally, the Whirlpool connection, which I think is my strongest piece of evidence. And you might be thinking, how on earth am I able to connect Skapar Gaban to whirlpools? Because, you know, there's no evidence of him having a devil fruit. So here's the basis for why I think that Skapar Gaban is connected to whirlpools. In chapter 11, 2039, Skapar Gaban calls himself the missionary of love. Now you might be saying to yourself, what does that have to do with whirlpools? Hold on. Wait. Be patient. Let's rewind to Arlong Park, where Sanji says, love is like a hurricane, and that being a saying in the East Blue. And you might be saying, I don't get it. Hold on. Be patient. Love is like a hurricane. Skapar Gaban is the missionary of love. Now let's rewind. Hold on. We gonna get there. Wait. Let's rewind to Amazon Lily. Nyomba? Is that her name? Mentions that it's a saying that love is like a hurricane is a saying in the East Blue. Now, if you look at an image of whirlpools and you look at an image of hurricanes, don't they look very similar? So the missionary of love is like a hurricane. Then you can make the connection that love is like a whirlpool. Now, you might be saying, girl, that's a stretch, isn't? Let's look at an image of a whirlpool and an image of a hurricane. So if love is like a hurricane, love is like a whirlpool. And I think the missionary of love would know a thing or two about whirlpools. So that's my theory. I think Skapar Gaban is the man marked by flames. So we'll have to wait and see. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what about Shiryu's point that this might be a government official? And I think that that is a fair point. And here's my headcanon-y response to that point. If we go back to chapter 2 in One Piece, Luffy miraculously survives a whirlpool, and Kobe mentions, wait, you got stuck in a giant whirlpool? You are lucky to be alive. And, you know, why would the world government help him to survive? If they got him in a whirlpool, why would he survive that? This is assuming that that whirlpool is connected to the man marked by flames. So that's the basis of my theory, what I'm saying here. And now the normal response would be like, well, that's just luck. You know, Luffy has plot armor. But I disagree. So let's go back to, I think it was a filler, the Rainbow Mist filler. Remember how we later see Rapa Nui, who's now a Navy general. He has this coin flip attack, and he has the Straw Hat ship right in his crosshairs, and he accidentally misses. And then we later found out that it wasn't an accident at all. It wasn't luck. It wasn't fate. Remember when Rapa Nui saves Nami from that big sea snake? Was that luck? We later find out it wasn't luck. It wasn't plot armor. It was friendship. Luffy had befriended the child version of Rapa Nui, which had caused Rapa Nui to later save them, the adult version of Rapa Nui, to save Nami and Luffy. Remember in Logtown how lightning strikes and it saves Luffy? Was that just luck? Or was it Dragon, you know, Luffy's father, taking care of him? Or in Marineford, how Dracul Mihawk remarks on how Luffy's greatest strength is not his physical strength, it is his ability to bring a lot of people together. Luffy is all about friendship, not fate. In Arlong Park, Luffy says, I can't use swords, I can't navigate oceans, I can't lie, I can't cook. I have friends to do that. In Whole Cake Island, Luffy tells Sanji that he cannot become the Pirate King without him. Luffy is all about friends. And that's contrasted by Blackbeard, who always talks about fate. And he's more fate over friendship. Remember in Jaya, where Van Augur basically talks about how the fate of the bird was to just die immediately? Or how Doc Q calls Luffy lucky because he chose an apple that didn't kill him? Or when Blackbeard tells Kuzan that a pirate crew is not about friendship. It's about, people with different wills just coming together and basically having their goals, just as a group. So Blackbeard is about fate and Luffy is about friendship. So when Luffy survives that whirlpool in chapter 2, my hunch is that it was about friendship that saves Luffy, not fate. I think Scopper decides to save Luffy when he sees the Straw Hat. That reminds him of Roger. Anyway, that's all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to check the notes for additional places where you can find my art. Thank you again for taking the time to listen. Bye.